Welcome to the CISO sessions. Today we're joined by Maurice Stebila, the Chief Information Security Officer at Harmon International. Welcome, Maurice.
Thank you, John.
So the first question that I have for Maurice is, how do you manage your current technology investment?
So John, that's a very good question. So this is an ongoing effort that we do at Harman. And it's a full review of every purchased and implemented security technology tool that we have today in the infrastructure. It requires, on a quarterly basis, I will actually contact our vendor, what I'll call client product specialist, and I'll sit with them on a regular basis and we will review what new features or functionalities have been added to this tool, any new modules or product enhancements, because what I've found over the years is that as time goes on, as updates continue to be installed throughout the infrastructure, many times I don't have full visibility to whether or not some of my security gaps that I was looking at purchasing a brand new tool for have actually been filled by the enhancements of my current investment. So for me to get the full return on my investment, it is again, a quarterly review of what I own, working very closely with the vendor, looking at those new features, enhancements. Can I reduce my risk, improve my security posture with what I already own today?
Yeah, the constant consolidation in the security industry gives us that ability to solve a problem without necessarily having to go out and purchase another tool.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times that after I've done that quarterly review, I actually found that I wasn't going to have to make an additional purchase to fill a security gap, which I thought was there, only to find out after the fact that with updates and new features of a particular product that I own, we were able to go right into implementation at really no additional cost.
There's nothing better than showing return on investment at the same time of reducing your overall risk position.
Yep, absolutely.
So as we start to leverage more and more either managed services or third-party service providers, we're exposed more and more to the risk that those parties bring into our environment. Talk to me a little bit how you go about managing third-party and vendor risk.
Well, for me, this requires at minimum a quarterly security and compliance review of all third-party access that we have today at Harman. Each of our sponsoring managers are responsible to review that access list and to determine, based upon the length of the project, whether or not access should be granted for another 90 days. So it's something that we take very, very seriously. If that project has ended, then those credentials should be immediately revoked. Another area that we focus on, it's just not the end user access, but the site-to-site VPN connections that we have with these third parties. By doing a quarterly review of those site-to-site VPN connections, we may find that a relationship has been terminated with that third party, and yet the VPN connection still exists. Or maybe the project has been completed and shut down, and yet access to that VPN connection still exists. So we'll do those quarterly reviews, both of individual access as well as the network access to that third party.
It's important to keep that line of communication open between the security office and the business office so that you know when those changes happen. If those projects end early, if those projects run long, you can make those changes as they happen.
It is. Many times we may not even get that information from the business, and it requires us then to do some investigation, do some monitoring of our network to determine, has there been any activity with these credentials or any activity on this particular VPN for the last 90 days? If not, let's disable it, and then after the next 90 days, let's actually terminate it.
Does your office get involved prior to the contract being signed at all? Do you do any sort of vendor review before you enter into that relationship, whether it's a IT relationship or a security relationship or even on the business side?
Currently, the reviews that we're doing today are more on the third-party cloud service providers.
Okay.
We've worked with various vendors and suppliers or partners who have provided us a risk assessment of the third parties that we're working with before we just go ahead and let them connect to our network or we connect to theirs.
We've all seen the stories about the ever-expanding amount of data in the environment. What are you guys doing to protect against not only the malicious loss of data, but the accidental loss of data?
So John, when it comes to the amount of global data, I recently read that the IDC, which is a global leader of market intelligence, stated a few years back that global data at rest was doubling every 4 years. In this year's report, they announced that global data at rest is now doubling every 2 years.
Wow.
And by 2020, on an annual basis, we'll be doubling our data. So the problem's getting larger and larger every year. And at Harman, we are experiencing data growth exponentially with mobile data, data in the cloud, all of the big data that we're collecting. Today, we are more at risk than ever before for either accidental data loss or malicious data loss. To counter that, one of the things that we've put in place is a data loss prevention program. What that really consists of is a full strategic review of where our data is stored at today. Most DLP programs include not only data at rest initiatives, but also data in motion, as well as data at the endpoint. I would say that for us at Harman, and really anybody else, having a DLP program is an absolute necessity for your security roadmap.
Yeah, for sure. I think when we first started talking with about data loss prevention, we talked about knowing where your data is, who's accessing it, and where it goes. And I think from there, you're able to start putting together your program to put controls in place to protect that information and make sure you know exactly how it's being handled.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's no easy task. There's a lot of data out there. With most DLP implementations, if you're a global organization, you're going to deal with some local, regional, and country privacy issues and regulations. So you're going to have to work very closely with your legal department, with your audit department. Our DLP program is still in an immature phase as we are just ramping up with our solutions. We're actually working with you, CBI, and we'll be for the next year or two on our full deployment of DLP. And I'm just excited to be able now to identify this data and to know exactly where it's going.
So Maurice, at my last place of employment, one of the things that I found to be a challenge was taking the security policies that my team had put together and actually translating those into practical controls at the IT operations level. Talk to me a little bit about how you've been able to manage that relationship between information security and the rest of the IT organization.
Well, so today I meet on a weekly basis with our operations and infrastructure team, as well as the rest of my peers. And this is really crucial for the success of any security deployment, whether large or small, here at Harman. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with the O&I team to find out that what I had thought would have been a fairly simple deployment of a security tool or solution ended up being much larger than expected, because the O&I team has additional insight in terms of total resources, both hardware and software, that are required for many of the implementations that we have. I really recommend that the operations and infrastructure teams become a extension of your security organization, because it's those organizations that are going to be doing the heavy lifting on your behalf.
So with everything going on in the global information security space, what's keeping you up at night?
So John, for me at Harman, it's not a single threat that's keeping me up at night, although if I have to categorize some of them, any advanced persistent threat that's targeting Harman. Social engineering and phishing attacks are a huge concern of mine, as well as any type of accidental data loss that we might incur. Those three seem to be at the top of my priority list. If I just were to speak about one of those, when it comes to phishing attacks and some of the social engineering that I've seen, an individual has to do a lot more now than just create filters and policies to block some of these malicious events and attacks. You need to go in and look at protocols. If you're talking about your email.cloud solution, whether that be semantic or WebSense, there are configuration settings such as DMARC and SPF that most corporations don't spend the time to configure, which will provide a additional layer of protection against some of these threats.
Yeah, I agree. Those technical controls can really help out. I mean, we all focus our time on educating our employees and trying to show them what a phished email looks like and what are the things to look for within the message. We actually just ran a phishing exercise here at CBI where, as a security company, it's what we talk about all the time, and we still had folks that fell victim to it. And they're well crafted. It's no longer good enough just to look for bad grammar or misspelled words. Yeah. You really have to make sure that you're always on alert for these things.
Yeah, these attacks are getting more sophisticated every single day. Security awareness, a change in the culture, of course, is very important. We at Harman do provide security training to our executive team. We're working very closely with our finance department who become potential victims of such attacks. We also look at training the IT staff so that everyone becomes not only a Harman employee, but a security ambassador for the security team.
Well, I thank you, Maurice, for coming out and joining me today for the CISO sessions.
My pleasure. Thank you, John.